Today I'm joined by Priya Santhanam. Priya is the founder of Scientist Engineer Mom. It's a platform that she created to eliminate bias and shame around infertility and motherhood in STEM, which is science, technology, math, and engineering fields. She's also the senior project manager at Amazon and has a PhD in chemical engineering from New Jersey Institute of Technology. Very warm welcome, Priya. I'm so glad to have you today.
Hi, Jagjeet. I'm so happy to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Priya, for joining me. To begin with, the discussion, why don't we start with how were you motivated to create this platform, Scientist Engineer Mom? Just tell us about your story.
Absolutely. Before I do that, I'll be doing a disservice, Jagjeet, if I don't acknowledge the wonderful work you've been doing. I have to tell you, I've of course stalked you and watched all of your videos, and big thanks to you, honestly, for giving women a voice through your platform. It's truly incredible. I think what strikes a chord for me, it's real, right? It's day-to-day things that women talk about, we worry about, we talk with our girlfriends about, and I'm so happy that you share this message through your work. Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. Of course. All right, let's talk about my story. So the motivation really came from the absence of conversation, Jagjeet. So a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago almost, I posted on LinkedIn on my profile an article about the conflict between the career clock and the biological clock, right? And how as women, we're always struggling between either having a baby and having this thriving career, or we've had a baby and now we're juggling between being a mom and having this career, right? And that post had over 1,000, almost 2,000 views now, right? But 22 women and men reached out to me through direct messages and said, me had this experience too, and this impacted me too. But if you look at the public engagement on the post, it's very low. And so to me, it was a reminder for me of my journey when I went through my infertility struggles and why I never spoke about it. Right. And there's a lot of factors at play here, and we'll talk about it. But that isolation, that lack of conversation, it was just a reminder for me of all of these things that I experienced, in the last 5-7 years. And so that's what triggered me to say, maybe I need to create a platform where I will talk about my story. And I know so many women in my life who are going through this, so they can talk about their stories. And my goal is to compile 100 STEM stories of infertility over the next 2 years, and hoping that that sort of paves the way to have these conversations, especially in the workplace, for women. And so, my story in a sense is a classic standard miscarriages, IUIs, IVFs, right? Anything that you would hear about infertility, it's the same. And I'm blessed that at the end of the day, I have my 2 children. They are almost 4 and 10 months old. It's strange that when you go through trouble in life, it feels so hard. And when you're done, in hindsight, it's like, oh, that makes sense. It was worth it, right? And so my goal is to be there for women in terms of their career advancement when they are going through that difficult time, right? It's easy to have that hindsight, but it's harder when you're in the moment. And that's the goal of the platform, to be there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Priya. So inspiring. And I'm so looking forward to, learning so much more from you. So my next question, Priya, is that all these STEM streams, seem to be, linked to what is called leaky pipeline, as in loss of women from careers in tech and engineering at a much higher rate than men. Where do you see this going from here, in the near future? What do you see out there, like based on your research? Do you feel like this is going to change anytime soon, or there's a long way to go?
You're absolutely right about the leaky pipeline in STEM, right? And the challenges that come with it. I think some 10 to 15% of women leave the workforce around 5 to 10 years into their careers. And this is not STEM, right? This is in general, women in general. In STEM, this statistic is 50%. think about it, right? Half the women who come in leave somewhere around 5 to 15, 10 years of their career, which is huge, right? And so absolutely that leaky pipeline exists. There is also everything to do with the pandemic that has made things worse, to be honest, for both men and women, but it impacts women. It hits women stronger because the statistics are already so skewed for women, right? So in fact, McKinsey just released their Women in the Workplace report where they said, I think it was about 23% of women considered leaving the workforce just in 2020 alone. So it's like setting the whole decade of work is negated by everything that has happened. It's setting ourselves like 5-10 years behind in all the progress that we've made in women getting to where we are, especially in these careers, which is just unfortunate, right? It's where the world is today. So where I see this going, hopefully it's going in a positive direction, right? And the conversations that we're having today, the work that you are doing, Jagjit, all of this, every small thing, it matters, right? All of this plays a role in the retention of women in general in their careers. Specifically talking about retention, there's so many factors that play into the issue of retention. Many of them we can attribute to motherhood and infertility in general, right? And infertility is not the key cause for women leaving STEM, of course, but it's a factor. And if it's a factor, it needs to be addressed, right? Both in terms of staying in our jobs, especially in STEM, and in terms of career advancement.
Yes, thank you so much, Priya, for that. And in terms of challenges, of course, there's so many challenges. Like you said, it's not the only factor, but it is a factor, that kind of tends to become that reason for women to leave these careers. So what are the main challenges that you think women face in trying to conceive, and do these impact their retention in STEM careers? So I believe this is something, that you can discuss from your own experience as well, but also based on any research that you've done. What do you think?
I talk about STEM because I understand this field the most, and also because it's a challenging field, right? It's one of the more challenging professions that women can take on for various reasons, and one of them being I hate saying male dominated, but the statistics are skewed towards the numbers being more of the men being in the field, and so of course that plays a role. Also, when you talk about someone in STEM, they could be in the office, they could be out in operations, they could be in a lab, they could be in all kinds of setting, right? Which changes the whole conversation around trying to conceive and going through infertility in particular, right? And so I remember when I was going through my IVF, there's like 1 million injections that we need to take, and I had to go on call to operations, and I had to decline an opportunity that I was waiting to get that one opportunity for 2 or 3 years. And I declined it because I was like, well, I'm going to be out there climbing vessels. I'm going to be tired. And how am I going to be able to put the shot myself? Right? It's just, there's so many considerations that stopped me from taking an opportunity that would have definitely be a stepping stone in my career. And so, those are the aspects when it comes to how infertility impacts women in STEM in general. And, the general conversation around the career clock and the biological clock being in conflict, right? So, especially if I talk about a woman like me who decided to go to grad school, right? By the time I finished my master's and PhD, I was 28, maybe 30, right? By the time I got into the workforce. And so that, of course, is when your fertility is starting to decline. And, there's so many things that need to happen for you in your life at that time. And so that whole conflict is so ironic, but it is what it is, right? Nobody's going to go and change the biology, but we can create a support system for people to feel supported in advancing their careers. Did that address what you were asking at all, Jagjit?
Yes, no, absolutely. Okay. And even with so I have a science background in the sense that I studied molecular biology, and I remember, obviously I didn't stay in the academia, moved on to be in more of a commercial setting. But I remember, even in the scientific career, expected to not, you're doing your research, you're in the lab, but then you're publishing, but then you have to present at the conferences, so there's need for travel and stuff. So you can only imagine, like, how you've done that yourself, like, it just kind of adds on to so much that you have to give up on. So for a woman especially, so you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm struggling. If you're in a position where you're struggling with fertility, so you have to go through these treatments that might take long and they're so frequent, and that at the same time you're presented with these opportunities to travel for this, or like you said, you were offered an opportunity that you really were looking forward, something you were looking forward to, and you had to decline that. So yeah, it just does feel those kind of scenarios. Do you feel like no matter how much we try, and like you said about the biological clock, we can't change those things, and no matter how much equality and that we ask for in the workplace, but certain things, like they're of course a blessing that women can conceive, but at the same time we do have it hard, don't we? So like you said, what we can really do is create awareness and make people think about these things when they are maybe policy making, when there's all of these things happening around us, and to really consider that it is something that we have to deal with. And it's something based on the gender, like, there's nothing literally we can do about it, but, provide a support system. So that's, really, really, good to have your insights on that.
For sure, Jajit. Just picking up, sorry if I may, picking up on what you were just saying, the policies, the external factors, absolutely, they all need to be there, right? And we can talk a little bit more about specifics around that. Yeah. There's also, as an individual, what do I want from my career, right? I know this is my life. I know this is my biology. Maybe I do. I hope I do. And then I know this is what I want in my career, right? What is my plan to achieve whatever I want to achieve? So I find that in the conversations that we have around women's advancement in general, we need to talk a little bit more also about what I can do for myself, right? And so a lot of young women reach out to me about going to grad school. Should I go to grad school? Should I get my PhD? Can I have a baby when I'm in my PhD, right? And for me, this was something I always knew. I wanted to get my PhD. I did not want any distractions. And I'm saying, I know it's a strong word to say, but it is true. I saw it that way, right, at the time. And I said, I don't want a child right now. I want to get my PhD, establish my career, especially as an immigrant coming in. That was so important to me to do that, right, on so many levels. And then I was going to have a child. And I always say that clarity is important. And of course, my plan didn't go perfectly because, I needed the help that I did. But that clarity is important for us to stop and question ourselves and make a plan for ourselves is so important.
No, absolutely. Completely agree with that. And, like you said, a lot of people were reaching out to you, but there was no discussion in the public forum. So what is it? Like, why are the impacts of infertility or infertility in general not discussed openly? Why do you think we hesitate so much?
Yeah, I think you're an academic, Jagjit. You know this when I say scientists are always hand waving, right? We have our data and then we can come up with all kinds of explanations on what that data means. So this is my theory. It's by no means perfect, or, it may not be correct even. I think a lot of this, at least in my experience, is associated with shame, right? In our society, there's this image, right, of women who are these fertility goddesses, and these images of women who are, holding a baby and like, doing this and working on their laptops and pumping and nursing and, working on so many things that we're doing at once. And there are these images that float around in pop culture. They're all kind of true, but they're all misleading. And what that leads us to believe is that if we cannot have children, we're not successful at doing what we're doing in life. And that, I think, leads to the shame that we feel in talking about this, right? And I would say some of this is external, like I was saying, where the society, it's years of conditioning, right? And I grew up in India, and I know that my husband and I were married for a long time, of course, before we had kids. Part of that by our choice, like I said, part of it because the biology just didn't work. And there are so many neighbors who would give my mom details of doctors at the time we lived in New York. In New York, your daughter should go see this person, right? And they would help them. And to my parents, they wouldn't know what to say. They would just feel shame or shy, and they wouldn't, of course, they would shield me from it. And they told me this, many years later. But it's similar, right? There is that external factor. There's also the internal factor. I have years of conditioning and this image that I see all around me in public. So I think this is what I'm supposed to be. And when I cannot deliver on it, I feel shame. And so I, of course, never talked about it when I was going through it. Hindsight is everything, right? Now I can confidently talk about my journey, but in the moment, it's hard. It's truly hard.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I was reading about this as well, and I came across an article, and they were talking about how women in that position, workplace, but it seem to be doing well. They don't want to talk about it because then they're worried. Is that going to be kind of linked to their progression in any way? Because they're going to need more time to be dealing with this, right? And I believe, and I really hope that most of the employers these days are open, about these things, and they try to understand. But I can still imagine some of the cultures, like South Asian cultures, for like our culture back home, would be really like, I don't know. I think women definitely do go through a lot of kind of a bias towards them getting being on the right track for progression, even though they're just as good, if not better, than their male counterparts. But because they have, so I can totally imagine them not being able to discuss this in a workplace, because they'll be like, no, I don't want to, stop, these people from giving me the opportunities that they would otherwise, right? So it is really, really hard. And it is such a shame that even in today's day and age, us women, like we some of us have to deal with those. So yeah, really, really tough one. Yeah.
It's true. Absolutely. And to be honest, I think it's true everywhere, right? I mean, I live in the US now, and I cannot say that I have experienced this firsthand, but it's definitely in my head because of the narrative around us, right? In terms of the bias in the workplace that you rightly pointed out about, I never said, I'm going through this, I need to be away for an ultrasound. Or even when I miscarried, I never told my coworkers. I showed up at work on day 2, not because I'm so strong, but because, it's also an escapism, right? You want to just do something that takes your mind away from it. And so, whatever. But that bias, right, which is why I talk about the bias on my blog, it's important. I do, some of it is internal, some of it is external, but it absolutely exists. It exists to a large degree even around motherhood, forget infertility. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, if you think about it, for men, it's never much of a consideration when they're thinking, when do they want to get married? When do they want to have children? When, or if there's a problem. So it does kind of fall upon us women more, right? So that is the kind of, it's kind of ingrained in the culture in such a way that we have to take more of a hit when it comes to that. We have to plan a lot more than men would, obviously. Because we do have the capability and the ability to give birth, but also when there are issues like that. So we can't just go and say, oh, I decided I want to get married late and have kids late and it's all done. So it is something that's quite frustrating in that sense. But like you said, things that we can't change, we have to make sure there are support systems around it. And that is really the way to go. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I also want to mention the aspect of the mental health and the awareness around that, right? So for couples who might choose to have a child externally, right, either through adoption or surrogacy, that's also not a done deal. It doesn't happen overnight, right? So that happens over a long period of months, sometimes years. And in that time also, it's the same bias in the workplace when we might not talk about it, the mental stress we might feel as a result of that process, we might not talk about it. And to be honest, in recent times, I've heard more of, same-sex couples or people who are going through adoption talk about this, where it's hard for us to accept it and appreciate it, the challenge that they might go through in getting through their journey of having a child, no matter what that journey is, right? And so that bias is real on so many levels. I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Priya, moving on to the next question. This is, again, I would like to know your views. what changes would you suggest in perception? We've talked about it a lot, but if you can elaborate more, and work and government policies or health covers that can really truly help bring women on the same pedestal as men. I know, and we've agreed that a part of it is still going to stay because there are differences, right? But what is it that can be done to bring us, to at least make an effort as individuals, as a society, to bring both genders at the same level?
An excellent question. When people say it's a great question, it means they're struggling with the response. And that's exactly what I need a magic wand, Jagjit, that I could just be like, swoosh, fix everything. But in all seriousness, it truly is a loaded question, right? There's so many aspects to it. I want to take it as, again, like I was saying, the external and the internal factors, right? And so externally, policies, there's definitely the number one thing around infertility, which is lacking definitely in the US, is better insurance coverage. You'll be shocked how many companies do not offer infertility support, right? I was blessed to be in a company that did. And so better insurance coverage, better support for time off, better flexibility, right? All of these small policies, they matter. And you probably saw this in the news about New Zealand announced paid leave, right, after miscarriages. And then I think some of the companies in the country that you are in the UK followed suit in terms of allowing those policies to be in place. So of course, those are on the policy level, those are the kind of things that I talk about. And when I talk about this, I feel less hopeful, to be honest with you, primarily because the policies around maternity leave are so bad in the US right now that it's a far cry from instating something for infertility. So bare minimum, I would say at least the insurance coverage is something that we absolutely need to make sure we have, right? The second layer to that is what can our coworkers do? What can leadership do? What can our employers do, right? And that is empathy, right? Externally, I would love to see more and more leaders talk about these conversations, their experiences, or at least share what's happening outside in terms of infertility and normalize these conversations, right? I think you can appreciate how we've come a long way as a society in talking about diseases like cancer in the workplace, talking about mental wellness in the workplace. So infertility is nowhere close to the conversations we've been having even about these critical topics, right? So there is a big road that we need to take in order to get there. The more we can normalize it, the better it can be. The other is the internal factors, right? Like I said, I'm not really a big fan of forcing everything externally, right? To me, it's more of a holistic approach where every single individual in the ecosystem has a role to play. So my role, and people who go through this, right, our role is to be the leaders, right? To talk about this, to normalize the conversations. I still remember when I miscarried the first time. I came back to the office, like I said, in 2 days, and my coworker came to me and said, I heard that you were sick and you're here, walking around. You seem fine. Were you just playing hooky? And I was shattered. I went to my office, I shut my door, I cried. It's fine. It's a normal reaction to, that question. But in that moment, now I think about that moment and I replay it in my head. What if I turn around and said, no, I just suffered a miscarriage, or I just had a miscarriage? Without emotions, it just helps to drive that conversation forward, right? And suddenly at least one person has learned that this exists in the world. This is a thing, right? And I think I lost an opportunity there, a teachable moment. But this is what I would say is my role, and everybody else who's going through this, we have a role to play in driving the change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everyone, right? Even in the families, sometimes, we kind of hesitate and don't discuss these things. So families, workplaces, as individuals, and obviously, like you said, external things will change, and they obviously need a push as well. But like things like within have to change as well for us to also understand that I shouldn't be feeling embarrassed or anything, like any shame at all to be talking about it, and therefore raising awareness with that one person who asked the question. I think that is really, really important. So is there anything else, Priya, that you would like to discuss? You said you get asked questions about from people. So is there anything else that any advice you would give to women who are in STEM and who are having a bit of a tough time, but they are on their journey? So what
Yeah.
advice would you give to them?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I would say for sure for early career women, especially, right, who is to make a plan, make a career plan, make a life plan, make a biological clock plan, whatever you call it, right? And the thing that I find is missing, Jagjeet, going back to your policies, right, is I remember when I was 20, 21, and I decided I wanted to go to PhD, and I had the clarity back in the day to say I didn't want to have kids during, right? And I had asked my father, is there a checkup I can get done to know if everything's okay and if I can have? I have no idea why I thought of it. It's just in hindsight, it's kind of freaky that I even had that thought, and I wish that I had acted upon it. And my parents, of course, told me, of course, everything is fine. Like, go get your education. And they empowered me to fly, right? And I did. But this is the number one thing I feel early on in our careers, younger women. I think there are ways to do this. I've talked about this with my OBGYN. You could get some basic screening done as part of your insurance coverage, especially in the US, that tells you about the general health and well-being, right? From a biological perspective, absolutely recommended. Number one. Number two, making a plan in general for your career and seeing how these two come together and being okay with the uncertainties that come our way, right? That's for early career. Now, for women going through the infertility journey, right? It's hard. I hear you. It's ridiculously hard. But know that you're not alone, right? There are others out there like us. You could go on YouTube, Jagjeet, and Google IVF. I mean, search for IVF, and you'll find so many people who document their journeys. You will not find anything about women in STEM going through this, right? And I've done this. And before I started my blog, I even went on Google and searched for women in STEM and infertility. There's very little out there about this, right? I think Kamala Harris famously said, I'm the first one, but I won't be the last, right? And so in talking about infertility in STEM, I'm of course not the first one. I'm one of the first, but I hope I won't be the last, right? For those going through it, let's talk about it. Reach out to people, make your own support group. Find a way to be okay with telling people you're going through it. It's hard, but if we can do that, it's a game changer.
Absolutely. And like you touched upon mental health, we're already going through so much in our day to day with our jobs and everything else. And then the pandemic comes along, there's already so much. And on top of that, having to feel a bit lonely because you can't discuss about this. It's just not good, right? So we have to take care of ourselves. And, at the end of the day, as individuals, every person has to take care of themselves. And I often say this, self-love, is it self-love something which is selfish? It is not, right? So because if we treat everybody equally, we want to treat everybody well, but then why wouldn't we treat ourselves well? We are part of the world. We are part of the same world too, right? So it is so important to just step back sometimes and think about it and see, what do I really want to do for myself? What do I need to do for myself to, keep myself healthy, my mental well-being, and everything else. So yeah, I think it is such an important aspect of it to really be open and not feel hesitation to talk about it. Given the mental health, importance of mental health, and especially for women, because we just tend to ignore our own, how we feel inside. So I think it's so important. So thank you so much.
Self-love is not selfish, Jagjeet. I'm going to frame it in my study and just quote you.
Absolutely. No, Priya, it's been such a pleasure. I am so impressed, inspired, and have learned so much from you today. And, really, all my best wishes. You're doing such an amazing job with this. All my best wishes that you achieve great heights in every aspect of your life and carry on creating awareness. And I will try to, spread the word about this as much as I can. So thank you so much for taking the time out today. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Jagjeet. More power to you. You're doing an incredible incredible service to the community, and I appreciate it. I'm sure everybody who watches it appreciates it. The last thing I want to say is, if you know a woman in STEM, or if you are a woman in STEM watching this video, please reach out to our blog, share your story. Know that every story matters, and you are helping someone who's struggling in isolation. We can publish your story anonymously if that helps you feel more comfortable, but please reach out and share the stories. It matters. Thank you, Jagji. It was lovely talking to you.
Same here. Thank you so much, Priya. Take care. And I will speak to you at some point soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.